problem with being able to get their minerals sourced without having to be accountable for them. So it's not simply the case of a Charles Taylor, it's not simply the case of a Paul Kagame, it's not simply the case of a Museveni. It's how do our organizations use their leverage to be able to make this process an accountable process? How do we challenge the corporations who make their profits from the resources that come from the Congo? It's not simply by the year 2015, it's estimated that more petroleum will be coming from the African continent. In fact, it will be coming from the Middle East. So if you look along the piece of West Africa and the country of Ghana, the country of Cameroon, Equatorial Guinea, Angola, Cabinda, North Africa, all of these countries, Sudan, tremendous degrees of resources are taken out. Sudan specifically, as you see the battles going on. So I think one of the things that we need to do is to reframe how we see the best way to address the issue, to be able to raise some of these issues of accountability and transparency, and make the resources work in the best interest of those particular countries.
So I would say that the good news around the resources is that the law that was passed last year around the Conflict Minerals Act has brought together NGOs and human rights organizations as well as corporations to now talk about where the resources come from and how the resources are actually extracted and what's the human impact. And so there's an effort now that is coordinated by some people that I'm aware of, and I've been on some of the conference calls, where you have the industry people asking questions, well, how do we prevent the negative human impact? How do we prevent that? If the minerals are sourced from the Congo, but then they're processed in Malaysia, or they're processed somewhere else, then how do we assure that we are not responsible for the human tragedy that's happening on the ground? So I think it's a positive thing that those conversations are happening. Another positive thing, I think, is that the work of civil society and the work of organizations here that try to support civil society in the Congo is very important. We have to realize that those organizations are doing as much as possible with the little resources that they have. And when we direct resources from here, it enables them to operate more fully. A lot of them work as volunteers, they take a lot of different risks, but they do need resources to enable them to carry out their work. As I indicated, the elections are coming up again in November. Many of the women's rights organizations are saying that we need to make sure that women are not tricked into supporting leaders that will not want to transform the institutions of the Congo, that we need to make sure that we have a different kind of leadership, a kind of leadership that will not tolerate corruption, that will not tolerate the kinds of under-the-table deals that are happening with corporations. So those are all opportunities. And one of the things that Friends of Congo is doing, which I think is very exciting, is to identify young people that are using technology in order to monitor the elections. And so they're trying to mobilize laptops, cell phones from here, to send to young people back in Congo so that they can have their parallel system of monitoring the elections, such that we can really know what's going on the ground. So the young people are saying, no, we don't want to just observe the sort of the taking hostage of the political space, but we want to participate. This country belongs to us, and we want something better to happen, to unfold.
Very true. I think the other thing, I was watching the video, and the images are so powerful. And for those of us who have followed Africa or followed international affairs for a period of time, we've seen these images too many times. We've just seen the body count too many times. I mean, between 1997 up to the early 2002 period, 6 million lives were lost in the Congo in the conflict that went on in Angola from the early 1990s all the way up until under Clinton that Angola was recognized by the United States. We're talking about 3 or 4 million deaths in Sierra Leone, etc. So we need to have a sense of outrage. We need to have a righteous sense of justifiable outrage. And we need to take that voice of outrage into our mobilizing, into our representatives. bridging off of what Marty also said, and I've been fortunate to be able to interview people from just about every country in Africa for the last 15 or 20 years. It's truly a blessing to be able to speak with so many different. And I don't know that I've ever met someone from a country who felt that things were so disastrous in their country that it was a situation which was hopeless. I've never heard that voice. I've spoken to people in the midst of war in Liberia and Sierra Leone. Civil society, as Marty is making the point, and that's where we should feel some juncture there. I know there are organizations here like IDEX, Global Fund for Women. If you take a look at their work, there was a report that Global Fund for Women produced, I believe it was last year, on some of the work they were doing with women's organizations in the Congo. The type of capacity building that's going on, not just in the Congo, but throughout Africa. I say this because I'm prejudiced and because I'm a nationalist, but I don't know of any stronger voices that I hear anywhere in the world than the voices that you hear of women coming from the African continent. I simply don't, in all fields. The use of SMS technology, which is happening throughout Uganda and East Africa, the work which is happening in countries like Nigeria, particularly around issues of the Delta, and very specifically the work that's happening around the DRC. So it's not as if the avenues aren't out there for us to be able to do work. One of the things I think that as organizations, having been involved in a number of them, that we have to find the point that when the microphone comes to us, that we're able to elevate the issues around the DRC. One of the gentlemen in the film made an excellent point where he talked about, Maurice Carney was talking about environmental issues. There's a Durban conference which is coming up very, very soon. But if there is an area where there's been more activism and more progressivism, it's been around the issue of sustainable development, around the green, around the environment. When the microphone comes to us around those issues, we need to make sure that the Congo, that the DRC is part of that discussion. Around the issue of militarization, which you're beginning to see, particularly in North Africa, the country of Libya, who's been hit by maybe 7,000 or 8,000 sorties over the last few months. This issue of that this is a policy that you militarize the continent more and more and more. This is despite your analysis of the Egyptian leadership, the Tunisian leadership, and the Libyan leadership. This is the process where the continent is being more and more militarized. And I think that those of us who work here in the United States, when we look at the cost of the wars that are going on in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, the policies in Haiti, we need to make that link between those two issues.